Hello, I'm Jonathan Menn, the Director of Equipping Church Leaders East Africa, and this is the first in a series of video lectures on the book of Esther. Now, the story of Esther takes place in Susa, which was the capital of the Persian Empire during the reign of Persian King Ahasuerus, also known as Xerxes I. He ruled the Persian Empire from 486 to 465 BC. Now, Esther is the one book in the Bible where the name of God never appears, neither his personal name Yahweh nor the typical word for God Elohim, and the circumstances and the actions in the book all appear to be natural, without God's overt appearance or any supernatural interventions. However, God is clearly present behind the scenes. The existence of multiple coincidences, irony, and ironic reversals that are necessary to the story show that God is the one driving the plot. Now, in these ways, the book of Esther mirrors the book of Ruth, the only other book in the Bible named after a woman. Both Esther and Ruth involve God's salvation of his people from actual or threatened destruction. Now, Esther also explains the origins of the Jewish feast of Purim. And Esther raises, but does not necessarily answer, important issues concerning how we should act in a pagan culture. It also includes a number of veiled foreshadows of the church and of the gospel. So let me give you a little bit more background about Esther, because the author of Esther is unknown. One of the main characters in the book is a man named Mordecai, a Jewish man. Some people have thought that Mordecai was the author of the book, but for various reasons, that probably is not correct, although he likely was the source of much information contained in the book, since he was a first-hand participant to much of the action. The author clearly was a Jew, both because of the subject matter of the book and the accounting of the origin of the Jewish feast of Purim. And the author undoubtedly was a resident of the Persian Empire, and probably of the city of Susa, because of the author's knowledge of Persian life, customs, and the details of events that are recorded in the book. Now, Esther 10, verse 2, suggests that the reign of Ahasuerus had ended, and therefore the earliest this book could have been written would have been in 465 BC. The latest that the book was probably written would have been before the Persian Empire fell to Greece in 331 BC. Now, the Septuagint, which was the Greek translation of the Old Testament, which was completed in 132 BC, also known as the LXX, and also our contemporary Christian Bibles attempt to order the books of the Old Testament largely in chronological order, and therefore Esther is placed after Ezra and Nehemiah as one of the historical books. But the Hebrew Bible places Esther in what's known as the Ketuvim, or the writings, along with Ruth and Daniel. Now, as I mentioned, in the book of Esther, the name of God never appears, but as I said, although everything appears natural, the existence of multiple coincidences and ironic reversals of fortune show that God is the one driving the plot. Related to this is the fact that Esther is an example, as we will see, of God's repaying people according to their deeds. And And as I mentioned, another purpose of the book is to explain the origin of Purim. Now, as I mentioned, there are some veiled foreshadows of the church and the gospel in Esther, which we will talk about as we go through this book. But in a way, Esther is foreshadowing Jesus. Timothy Keller notes that, quote, Jesus is the true and better Esther, who didn't just risk losing an earthly palace, but lost the ultimate heavenly one, who did not just risk his life, but actually gave his life to save his people. Esther, as we will see, risked losing her life and her earthly palace where she resided to save her people. Jesus did it for real and actually lost his life in saving his people. Now, Esther, as I say, takes place in the Persian Empire in the city of Susa. So while the Jews had been permitted to return to Israel, most of the Jews did not do so. And so the book here concerns Jews in the diaspora, in other words, Jews not living in Israel. And the Jews living in the Persian Empire were living in basically an empire whose spiritual and moral values were considerably different from theirs. Similar to the church likewise is spread, is not limited to a particular country, but is spread all around the world and largely exists in cultures and societies that are contrary, if not hostile, to the biblical values that Christians should follow. And so the storyline of Esther essentially is this, that the main characters are Mordecai, Esther, a man called Haman, and King Xerxes, or Ahasuerus. The plot revolves around the king became angry at his wife, Queen Vashti, and deposed her from being queen. His advisors said, you need to have a great beauty pageant, and so they brought in all beautiful virgins, one of whom was Esther. The girls would have one night with the king, and the one who pleased him the most would become the new queen, and that proved to be Esther. Now, but this man Haman had been promoted by King Ahasuerus to the second top position in the country, and the king ordered that everybody would bow down and pay homage to Haman whenever he rode through town. But Mordecai refused to do so, and that infuriated Haman, and so he decided he didn't want to just kill Mordecai, he wanted to kill all the Jews. And so he developed this plan with the king's connivance to kill all the Jews on the 13th day of Adar, which would be towards the end of the year, the Jewish month of Adar. So Mordecai learned of this plot, told Esther, and at first she said and said, you need to go into the king to try and get this reversed. Well, they had a rule that if you went into the king's presence without being summoned, and the king did not raise his scepter to you, you'd lose your life. And Esther told Mordecai this, but Mordecai said, listen, your life is going to be forfeited if you don't see him. Yes, you have a chance to lose your life, but if you don't, there will be God's people will be saved by some other means, but you and your family will perish. And so Esther called for a 3-day fast and said, I will go see the king, even though he has not summoned me, and if I perish, I perish. Well, the king raised his scepter to her, said, what do you want? I'll give you anything up to half my kingdom. And she said, I want you and Haman to come to a banquet that I will host for you. And they did, and then they said, what do you want? And then she said, come to a banquet tomorrow, and then I'll tell you what I want. And so Haman and the king did, and Esther said, I would like my life as what you give me, my life and the life of my people. And then the king said, who is this? Why are you asking for this? And Esther told him, my people have been sold to be murdered. Who has done this, says the king. The wicked Haman, said Queen Esther. And then through various things that we'll talk about when we get there, the king orders Haman to be hanged. And although the laws of the Medes and the Persians could not be revoked, the king had Esther and Mordecai draft a new edict giving the Jews the right to defend themselves and kill anyone that tried to attack them. And that happened, and that then would be the origin of the festival called Purim. That's the essential storyline of the book, and the book unfolds basically in chronological order, and in 10 chapters. Actually, chapter 10 only has 3 verses, which concentrates on Mordecai. But so with that background, in the next lecture, we will begin going through this wonderful and amazing book of Esther.